Welcome back, everyone, to our Code a Website series. And yeah, let's just jump right into it. Last week we did kind of the intro, getting started, HTML, adding content. As you probably remember, the content didn't look the best when we viewed it. And so that's what we're going to work on today. We're going to learn a completely different coding language. It's called CSS. And I'll explain more about it in a little bit, but this is how we kind of improve that styling of our HTML code. And then next week, same day of the week, same time, we'll go through some more advanced stuff. If it is just like we don't get through everything today, we'll probably just do more CSS. If we're really feeling great, we might try a little JavaScript because it is really cool. It is quite difficult to get started though, so we're not gonna try to rush to it. I'd rather us learn as much CSS as we need. What is CSS? So CSS stands for cascading style, and this refers to kind of two different things. The cascading part does. The cascading kind of refers to when, if you remember, we would put in HTML, we would have like our HTML tag, and then inside of that, we would do our head tag and our body tag, and inside of the body tag, we're doing our H1 and our paragraphs. And basically, what the cascading part of CSS means is if I were to apply some sort of styling to the HTML tag, all of the tags that I have within it also get that same style. We'll kind of see that in action, so don't worry if it doesn't fully make sense. And then the word style sheets actually comes from the world of print production, so like newspapers and magazines and such, to make sure that anytime something was being printed at a printing press, they would have this basically a document that says, here's the colors, here's the fonts, here's all the rules. And they just kind of yanked that term over for web development. At its core, CSS just describes how our HTML elements should be styled. And then you can actually create one CSS file and link it to multiple HTML web pages. So you don't have to rewrite the same style code time and time and time again. And I'll show you a little bit of that today as well. So, like last week, we kind of broke down what our HTML element, how you write that. This is that kind of comparison with CSS. So CSS is written with what is called rules. All of your rules will start with what is called a selector. This is just basically a little piece of code that says which HTML elements should be getting this style. So in this case, and we'll learn a number of selectors today, this one is just selecting all of our paragraph elements because it just says P. That's the tag that we used for our body text. This just selects all of those. Then after our selector, we will have one or more style rules in a declaration block. So that starts with this kind of open thing that I forget its name. It's kind of squiggly, a bracket. And then it closes off with the closing one, just like we had with the open and closing caret in HTML. And then inside, you have all of your style rules with declarations. These consist of a property, basically the type of style that you're changing, and then a value of like the specific thing that you're trying to change it to. So in this case, we're targeting color, which this is going to be our text color. And in this case, we're going to change it to blue. As I mentioned, you can have kind of multiple web pages using one style sheet. You can also have multiple different ways that you're adding CSS code. So the way that we're going to do, because this is kind of just best practice to make sure that your HTML code is all in one document, your CSS code is in another document, they're kind of separated, is we'll use this link. We did this last week when we added that icon to our browser tab, but this is just a different way to use this link tag. You can also use this style tag in your head section of the HTML and put CSS in between those. That's another way that you can add CSS. The thing with this, though, is you couldn't use this code for any other web page. So Links are better if you want to use one kind of document for multiple web pages. If there's like page specific styling that you want to do that no other page on your site will ever need, you can put it in here. And then the last one is that you can actually use the style attribute in the HTML tag. We did the attributes before with our href or our source, stuff like that. You can also use the style one to apply a CSS code specifically to this element and this element only. So in this case, there's four different ways that I'm applying CSS. So in this one, it's like this separate file says change my paragraph text to yellow. This one says change my paragraph text to pink. This one is saying change it to green, and this one is saying change it to blue. So there's all these different ways that you can add it. And then the one that actually gets applied, the one that actually gets used, is whichever one is written last. Because browsers read from top to the bottom. So in this case, all of this paragraph is going to be blue. But if I have any other paragraph elements on this page, it's going to be green, because that's right here. So it gets a little complex. That's why I just do one document. I don't add my CSS code anywhere else. It just makes it a lot simpler. CSS also has different levels of specificity. So there's a multiple different ways that you can target an element to apply styling to that. And we'll go through all of these. And they can conflict, right? So just like before, we had all these different code of paragraph text is yellow, pink, green, blue. Which one actually gets applied? This is kind of that same concept, but this can be within the same document. And the universal selector is the most generic. This is basically saying select everything on this page and change the styling about them. You can get a little bit more specific by targeting a specific element, maybe your paragraph text, maybe all your H2s, maybe all your images. That's a little bit more specific than everything. So the element one would take precedence over the universal one. And then we'll explore IDs and classes today as well, because we didn't cover that last week. There's a bunch of different ways that you can say what type of color that you want to change something. These are all different formats. So I'm going to start at this very bottom one. CSS has 140 named colors. And what these are just, these are keywords that are associated with a specific color. So we can say color blue, and it's going to apply a blue, but it's whatever is the typical blue in CSS. We don't get much further control over that. There's 140 in total. And as you can imagine, there is definitely more than 140 colors on websites. And so if you want to add a truly custom color, you'll want to use one of these other five formats. So RGB stands for red, green, and blue, and this will have a value associated with each. So this first value associates to how much red is in the color. The second value is how much green is in the color. And the third one is how much blue is in the color. The max for any of these is 255, and the minimum is 0. If your three are all 0, 0, 0, that's going to be fully black. There's going to be no color. If they're all 255, 255, 255, it's going to be fully white. And then these are just kind of hard to think about what they would be with just these numbers, but I'll show you where you can like grab a color and get these specific code. This next one adds this new what's called a channel, and this is the A channel that stands for alpha. And this is a level of transparency that you want to add. So with our just regular RGB, it's just going to be fully colored in, but maybe you want it to be like somewhat see-through. You don't want it to be fully colored. Maybe you want to be able to see a little bit behind it. Then you would have to add this alpha channel. This is a number between 0 and 1. And so 0 would be that it is fully opaque, I believe. I might be getting this switched up from my memory. So one side will be it's fully opaque, it's fully colored in. The other side is going to be that it's fully transparent, which means that it's fully see-through. You actually wouldn't see the color. And then something in between would kind of give like an in-between effect. HSL, I won't go through too much. It stands for hue, saturation, and lightness. Hue is just where on a color wheel are you? If like red is at the top and green is at like the bottom left and blue is at the bottom right, and you just kind of go around there. Out of 365, where are you there? Saturation is kind of a scale where 0 is gray and 100% is fully colored. And then lightness is another scale where 0 is no light, so black. 50% is just like the right amount of light, so it's going to be your true color. And then 100%, like it is in this example, is like too much light and it's going to be fully white. I don't really use this one, but it is an option. And then you get the same option with this A for adding transparency to that. And then the last one, this is called a hex code. This is what I typically use the most. This is just another way to rewrite RGB. These go where these first two are going to be your red channel, the second two are going to be your green, and the last two are going to be your blue. And these range on a value from 00 to FF. Where they go from numbers to letters, I'm not quite sure. I always just use a visual tool, which I will show you, the one that I typically use to find the right color. And then you just take that code and paste it. There's also units. So these are different sizes of things. So if you wanted to size an image, if you wanted to size like a background, anything like that, you'll want to use a specific unit. The ones I have on the left here, these are called absolute units. So these are your centimeters, millimeters, inches, pixels, points, and picas. These are they're absolute whenever you change them, like you change your screen size. If I view it on my laptop, if I view it on my phone, if I view it on my iPad, it'll be the same size no matter what. So if I put, 5 inches for my image, no matter what screen I'm looking at, it's going to try to show it as 5 inches. And so you might have to scroll over or do all these other things. Then there's all of these relative lengths. This kind of helps get us into this kind of more dynamic sizing. These are relative lengths. These are taking the size of whatever you're trying to change relative to something else. So the first one is going to be the font size of the element. Every element, whether it is text or not, has a default font size, even if it doesn't have text, which is a little funky. And then whatever value you provide with EM here would be multiplied by that. So if like, let's say my image has a default of 12, I don't know if that's actually true, I'm just making up a number, and I put 2 EM, it would be 12 times 2 for 24. It's a little tricky to kind of figure out. You're just kind of playing around with till you get it to where you want it to be. REM is very similar. There's this kind of invisible root element. That's your document. There is a default font size on that. I believe it is 16 by default. And then same thing, you provide a number like 3 REM, 4 REM that gets multiplied by that 16. Then there is the percent. So this would be relative to the parent element. So let's say we have um, the container, so like our HTML tag, let's say its size is set to be the whole screen. And then you have something within our HTML tag and you do 50%, that'd be half the screen. Because the HTML one that it's its parent would be 100%. And then its child ones, when you set 50%, would be 50% of that. And then if there's that, it keeps going. And then we have these last two, so VW and VH. So this is relative to what is called the viewport. And the viewport is just a kind of common term for the device screen size. So if I'm accessing on my phone like this is my viewport, this screen. And VW is going to be the width of my screen, so to left and right. And VH is just the opposite, so the height. And one VW or one VH is 1% of the total. So this is like my total width of my screen on my phone, and one VH would be 1% of it. 100 VH would be 100% of my screen. And that adapts to whatever screen someone's using. So if I were to put, image at 100 VH or VW, sorry, let's do it with that 100 VW, it would be full screen size on my phone, but it would also be full screen size on my laptop if I was accessing the same website from my laptop. That was all of our intro stuff. Now we're going to get to actual coding. So we're going to use the same text editor, um, Visual Studio Code. I do have some new starting files for us so that we don't have to rewrite a bunch of HTML today. And it is this short link. So bit.ly/s26 CSS. So you can do file new window if you want a new kind of instance of VS Code, or just file open folder, and you go and find it'll download as a .zip. You just double click. We're all on Mac, so you can just double click and it opens up the folder. You select the folder title and then you click open. I will zoom in quite a bit so that you can see a little bit better. So we got some things in here. So under icons, we got some stuff here that I put in. You'll notice that there is this file called an SVG. And I just want to touch on this briefly because this is a file you might see out there. We've been working with kind of JPEGs and PNGs. These are what are called raster images. Those are based on pixels. So those have a width and a height that are composed of all of these tiny little squares, and each square has one color in it. And then when you see it from further away, it looks great. That's kind of when you maybe try to take a small image and you've tried to resize it and it gets really big and it gets really blurry. Those are built with pixels. SVGs, on the other hand, are called scalable vector graphics, and these aren't built with those same pixels. So if you click on one in our icons over here, I get this little icon up here that's like this little file forward, and it's reopened as source code. And our SVGs are actual kind of pieces of HTML code that they all make up this image. So in this case, it's like a little email image. Now, we're not going to talk about how do you code one from scratch because it gets quite involved. Typically with these, you can just go to something like Adobe Illustrator, kind of design your thing, export it as an SVG, and then you already just have that. The great things about these is because it's built with code, once you scale it up more and more and more, it doesn't lose that quality. So it still will look sharp on any screen. I do still have some images in here for our various different little project areas that we're going to do. And then I have our index.html file. Most of this is stuff that we covered last week, but there's a few things in here that I do want to touch on that we did not get to. Nothing super crazy, nothing that actually changes a visual. They're all just things in the background. The first thing is you'll notice that we have within our body section, we have this header, we have a main, we have nav. Down here, we'll have footer. These are what are called semantic elements. So this basically allows us to write just like little bits of code that help browsers and search engines and everything understand what this content is. So in this case, it knows that this is my header area and that this is my navigation menu. And this is going to be my main article, the main content of this page. And then down here, this is my footer with another navigation menu. These don't actually change anything about how your code looks in a browser. It just kind of helps the browser understand a little bit more about the content. It is not a requirement to do this. It is just kind of best practice. It helps with screen readers. It helps with search engines, just like that alt text that we talked about last week. And then the only other thing in here that I think is new is this thing called a div. This is just a kind of grouping element. So it's very similar to our like header and our nav that kind of doesn't really do anything. It's not changing how anything looks, but it's just a different way to group stuff together that doesn't like have specific meaning. Where up here, the header is my header. The navigation, my nav is my navigation menu. This is just, hey, I wanted this head, this H1 and this paragraph text to kind of be grouped together in case we want to style it together or something like that. But it doesn't have a meaning behind it. So now let's get our CSS kind of going. So I'm gonna, in VS Code, I'm gonna click over here in my Explore window, and you should probably see this kind of highlight around here. The only thing is just make sure that you're not clicking on any of these folders first, because that might change where this file is going to be and it might change the file path that you need to use. So I click just kind of in this empty space, and I'm going to click my new file icon up here. Now, best practice when you're going to do your CSS is you name it styles.css. You can, if you're going to have multiple different CSS style sheets, um, you can just change what styles is if you have like a specific thing that you want to do. This is just kind of the standard. I'm gonna hit enter, and I get my new file up in here. Now, something that I like to do when I am working with CSS is because CSS is designed to style my HTML elements, I like to see them both at the same time. And I don't like to have to keep switching back and forth and back and forth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on my styles.css tab right here, and then I'm going to click split right. And what that does is it opens up like another kind of section over here so that I can see both side by side. And then I can get rid of this one right here. It's the same file, it's just in a new tab. So I can click close, and then now I just have my HTML and my CSS. Not a requirement to do this, it just reduces the back and forth. So, like last week when we started off our HTML code with our comments, as a reminder, that is when we went like open caret, exclamation point, hyphen, hyphen, write your comment like this, like so. You can do the same in CSS, but how you write a comment is slightly different. It is the forward slash, so it goes that way, and then your asterisks, and then you can start typing what you want. So this is going to be my comment, and then to close it off, because it doesn't automatically close by default, it's going to think everything else that we write is going to be still within our comment, which we don't want. We just do the same thing, but in reverse. So we do the asterisks and then another forward slash, and that closes off our comment. So this over here in our HTML and this in our CSS do the same thing. Now we need to tell our HTML to connect to this CSS style sheet. Otherwise, any sort of CSS that we write in here isn't actually going to work. Because when a browser comes to our website, it looks for our homepage, our index.html, and it will start reading from the top to the bottom. And there is no reference to our CSS in this file, and so it just never finds it. It'll never find any of the style code that we write. So I'm going to go to the end of my head section. This is our metadata section. This is where we are at our links. I'm going to go to the very end of my last link right here. So the end of, for me, line 6, if you didn't add a comment, it'll be line 5. I'm going to hit enter, and I do my open caret link space. And we have to set what the relationship is, just like we did with this. This is our icon. This one we do rel equals, and then in between our quotations, we write the word style sheet. And this tells the browser, hey, we are linking to a style sheet with our CSS code. I'm going to move my cursor to the end of this, and I'm going to hit space. And we do our same href that we've been doing. So href equals, and then in between these quotations, I'm going to do forward slash, and then VS Code automatically finds my styles.css file. So I can just click that and go to the end and make sure that you do the closing caret. Right now it's showing me the end of my head section is in red. That's trying to tell me, hey, there's an error. There's something wrong. If you see something like this, it's actually typically not in the line that you're seeing the red, but the line before it. So always just kind of check to make sure, and I can look and say, oh, I didn't add my closing caret. And when I do that, that red goes away. No, no. You can name it whatever you want. Most people will name the initial one styles.css, but then they might have some more like specific ones for different things that they're doing. So what's important now is we'll see in my tab right here that there's this kind of like circle. And that just basically means we haven't saved it. So make sure that you save on your index.html. If you save on one file, like if you go to styles.css and do your command S, it's not going to automatically save your index.html. So you might have to go over here and hit command S, or you can go to file, save all, and I'll do the same thing. So we should all still have our extension from last week. So if we click go live down here, it should start our live server, and we can see the code that I've written for us to start. Um, these images I just took from this website called Unsplash. This is a website where you can grab free images, like stock images, if you ever want to use them. There is some kind of requirements if you're going to use it in such a way that you're kind of like publishing things. You should be giving the photographer credit on stuff. We're just playing around with it. So I'm not publishing this anywhere. So we should be good. Okay. So I want to make sure that our linking did work. I always suggest that you do this. And we're going to do that by learning that first selector, which is our universal selector. So I'm going to go to the end of my line 1 on my CSS comment, hit enter. And to select everything on the web page, I do an asterisk. And then I'm going to hit space. And then now I can do my open curly bracket, and it'll automatically add my closing curly bracket. And I'm going to write my actual CSS code in here. Just to make things kind of more visually appealing, I always enter in between. This really helps when you have multiple different style rules, because if I were to start without entering in between and I just start adding all my stuff here and then here, it kind of like gets hard to read after a while. So now let's learn our first rule, which is going to be color, which we saw. So we can just type the word color. And color is going to be what is our foreground color. Most cases, this is going to be your text color here. And then after you write the property name, you'll do a colon, and then you'll do a space. And here we can put in that color that we want to actually change the text to everything to. So I am just going to just use this to check if it works. It's going to look a little insane. We're just going to use the keyword red. So just red, and then you always have to close off every rule with a semicolon, because that makes sure that the browser knows that you've ended. And if I save on my CSS and I go back to my live server, all my text colors should be in red. I'm going to go to a new tab because I want to show you where you can find all these color um, things. So if I do, I think it's HTML color names is what, there we go. So HTML color names, there's this page on w3schools.com, and this has a list of all of the named colors for um, that you can use in your website. So we just use red. So that's going to give us this red right here. But you could also use pale green, you could use moccasin, you could use light pink. And the nice thing about VS Code is as you start to kind of type one of them, so if I wanted to switch to light pink, it'll kind of populate in here. But it's just basically the name of that color on this web page, no spaces, and all lowercase. So I'll actually just go back to red. Now, we've changed the text color, but we can also change the background. So right here, this background is this just typical white, but you can change it to whatever you want. It's a super simple property. So at the very end of my color red, at the end of the semicolon, I'm adding another enter. The property for changing the background color is background hyphen color. You do your colon and your space, and then you can enter another color to change the background. So I'm just gonna do black for now. So black, and then I do my semicolon. And when I save, my background is now black. Again, it doesn't look great. I'm just showing you how you can start to do this. Mhm. I'll show you one last property, and then I'll show you where I typically go to find what colors I want to use so that we're not limited to just the 140. And the last one is going to be our opacity. So if you remember from that slide with that alpha channel, I was like, oh, a value from 0 to 1, and 0 is it's fully colored, 1 is it's completely transparent. Um, this is basically the same thing, just in a property. So if I add a new line, I can just type opacity and then do a colon. And then I'm just going to put 0 0.5 and then a semicolon. This is still a value between 0 and 1. So when I save this and I go back, you notice it doesn't look great. And that's because we selected everything and then told it to be like half transparent. And so they're all just like fighting on top of each other. If you look really closely, you can still see that there's things there. But because we have like a black background, but it's half transparent, and then it's fighting with this half transparent red, it's like that. You can also change these values if you wanted maybe it to be like 9, so 0.9. It now kind of gives like almost like a hazy effect in it, where it's not as like crystal clear. And then if I did, let's just say 0, and I go back, you see nothing. Everything goes away. So I'm gonna get rid of these. If you want to save them for just like your notes or something, I recommend commenting them out. So you can just kind of start off by doing your open asterisks, and then at the very end, you can do the reverse. And so then that kind of, you still have the code for it, but it's just commented out, so it doesn't actually apply to anything if you want to save this. Because then I go back and I get my default because I've commented out my code. So I'm going to show you two websites that I typically use for finding colors or color palettes or stuff like that. The first one, which I do use most of the time, is called realtimecolors.com. The reason that I like this website is that it actually shows you these colors, and there's also some fonts on here on a kind of real live website. So it's a little bit easier to kind of see how things would look when you start placing things together. You can change the colors down here. So if you wanted to change all the text color, you can just click here and start playing around with things like so, and kind of see all these changes. You can do that in the background as well if you wanted to kind of change some things. You can keep doing that. What I typically do is I use this dice icon down here, or you can hit spacebar on your keyboard, and this just randomizes colors, and it just keeps them random, and it keeps them looking like pretty good most of the time. There's some that I look at them like that's a little gross, but most of the time when I'm deciding colors on something, I honestly just come to this website and hit spacebar a bunch of times until I'm like, ooh, I like this color here, and I can click it and I get what that hex code is for that color. If you want to get a little bit more specific, you can also go to color.adobe.com. And this is Adobe Color. I won't go through too much of it, but they have a bunch of different tools for kind of creating these color palettes. If you wanted to go all different shades of one color, if you wanted to, there's this extract theme option. So maybe you found a picture that you really like the colors. Adobe Color can actually create a color gradient, like a theme from this image. There's also a gradient option if you want to create something like that. You can also look at trending palettes on the trends tab. This can be some kind of fun ways to just find different colors that you want to do. And let's just explore. So I'm going to go back to real-time colors, and I'm going to hit spacebar a bunch of times. You can do whatever colors that you want to do. by doing this. And I can change maybe my background to this like light blue, right? So that's under my secondary here. So when I click on here, I get this hex code, which starts with a pound symbol, and then it has 6 characters. So I'm just going to highlight them in Command C. When I go back to my VS Code, I can use that in my code as my color. So instead of doing where it says black, I could, oh, that was fun. My keyboard did some auto typing. I'm just going to Command V over it, and that will give me a color, just like I did with black, where it just gave me a pure black, but this will give me this instead. So if you wanted to see what that looks like without it being commented out, just looks like that. And then now I can go to my website and I see that specific color that I found. But instead of trying to find if it's one of those 140, I just used this hex color code. So I'm going to get rid of this sample. If you want it to keep it, you can just comment it out. So similar to our colors, there is some default fonts that are available. If you go to cssfontstack.com, this is a really helpful website to figure out what fonts are pretty generally available. So if you're trying to put a font on a website, if the user accessing your website doesn't have that font installed on their computer, it's not going to show. And so this website collects what are called web-safe fonts. And these are things that are generally available on most computers by default. You actually do get some um, kind of percentages of like an estimated 94.41% of Mac computers have Furtura. I don't know why they consider Avant-Garde one because it has 0 and 1.08%. So maybe don't use that one. We have a different options for our fonts. We have sans serif and we have serif. Big difference between these is that serif has those little extra appendages to stuff. So you can see like this T in text. It has like the little kind of dangling things up here. Sans serif doesn't have those. There's also some monospaced ones, which kind of look more like typewriter or code type stuff. Some fantasy and some script ones. Typically, if you're making websites, you're going to be sticking to a sans serif or a serif font. But if you want to get really fun, feel free to do more. So we're going to work on changing some fonts. And I am going to start off by using this Geneva one right here. So in order to do that, you don't have to download anything. I'm going to go into my universal selector still. And to change the font, and I'm just gonna clean this up just because I did some extra spaces and stuff. To change what font certain elements are using, you use font hyphen family. And then I can do my colon, and then you'll put in the name of the font. So in this case, it's Geneva. So capital Geneva, and then I'm going to do my semicolon. And when I save this and I go back to my website, you'll see that I now have the Geneva font applied to, it's applied to everything, how we did it. So it's applying to all of the text that I have on my screen. Now, I don't know if you noticed on cssfontstack.com, but with our Geneva font, it's available on 99.64% of Mac computers. So people using Mac will probably see it. Only on 2% of Windows computers. So most, if not maybe all of the people accessing my website from a Windows computer actually wouldn't see this font. They would see the default one that we were getting before. You can, if you want some more control over what fonts people are seeing, add what is called a fallback font. So that's basically if the user doesn't have the font that we have selected here, we can add a backup. It's super easy to add a backup. You just, at the end of your name, so at the end of Geneva, you just do a comma and then a space, and then you can add another one here. So typically, because I picked one that is really high Mac usage and very low Windows usage, I'll probably want to pick one that a lot of Windows users have this time. So I'm going to pick this Trebuchet MS one right here. It has almost 100% on Windows. Now you'll notice as I start typing it, I get this weird kind of syntax highlighting where the first one is in this color, the second one is in this one. Yours will probably be in different colors depending on your VS Code theme. And that's because this font has a space in between. And typically when you're writing code and there's a space, it's going to think that you're starting some other piece of thing. So if you want to make sure that the code is kind of read together, you just do a single quotation and then you can put the name in between. And this makes sure that the word trebuchet and the letters MS are kind of put together. And then now if I save and I go back to my website, I'm not going to see any changes because I do have Geneva on my computer. But someone who has a Windows computer that maybe doesn't have Geneva, but does have Trebuchet MS will see this new font. And so we'll start from over here, check to see does the user have Geneva? If not, it goes to the next one, which is Trebuchet MS. And that's where we've ended so far. And you can add as many fallback fonts as you want. You could just keep going and going and going and going and going. Okay. Now, in the very unlikely event that the user doesn't have any of our fonts or any fallback fonts, if we just want to make sure that they get something in this general category of sans serif, we can add that keyword to the very end. So I would do another comma, and then I'll do sans serif with a hyphen in between. And this just basically makes sure that if a user is seeing a default font, because they don't have any of the other fonts that I specified, that at least they're seeing something that's a little bit in the style of what I want them to see. They're not seeing something that's, for some reason, a fantasy or a script one, which probably wouldn't happen, but this at least we can confine it a little bit. So very similar to colors, where they had those specific color names, and then I showed you kind of how do you add some custom ones. I'm gonna do the same with fonts, because there's obviously not a lot of options right here, and there's a lot of more fonts that we want maybe on our site. There are ways that you can include the font like files with your website files so that you can use like a truly custom font that everyone will have because you're publishing the website with the font files that you're using. I'm not going to show you how to do it because it's a little complicated for us, but I do want to show you Google Fonts. So this is fonts.google.com, and this is a font service from Google that allows you to use all of the fonts that they have available. So in this case, it is almost 2,000 different fonts. Typically, you'll probably find something in here that you like that you can use. So if I were to just scroll down a little bit, maybe I want this Open Sans font, or maybe I want Google Sans, or maybe I want Montserrat or Inter. There's all these different options. Whenever you want a font, and let me just delete these from the last time I taught this. Guess it's saved from them. So let's say I want Open Sans. If I click on here, I can see all of these different styles I get. So this is going to be bold, italic, all these different options. And I can click Get Font. And when I do that, it gets added to a cart. Once it's added to my cart, and you can do this with multiple fonts at the same time, you don't have to just do it one by one. You can click this Get Embed code, and this gives us some HTML code that allows us to use this font that I found. So I'm going to click this copy code button and I'll go back to my HTML file and I'm going to paste it, making sure it's before my CSS style sheet because I'm going to be using it within my CSS style sheet. So I want the browser to know that I'm using Google Fonts before I start actually using it. So in between my icon and my style sheet, I'm entering and just pasting that code that I got from Google Fonts. And I'm just gonna do some tabs in to make it look better. You don't need to know what any of this means at all, because it's a lot of stuff. I'm gonna save over here. And then now I can use that font that I found, this Open Sans, as my font. So I'm gonna go all the way over here, just delete this, and I'm gonna do Open Sans using it in our quotations because it's a two-word font. And when I save and I go back to my website, I now get that font with it. And that's all just from fonts.google.com. If for some reason Google Fonts as a service just goes down, like it crashes, unfortunately, your website will have some issues with some fonts. So always make sure if you're using this that you're still doing your backups like we were doing before. Um, so far we have been changing everything at once. Um, and this is maybe not what we want to do. So maybe, right, I have all of these H2s. So I have about, I have projects, I have these are H3s down here. I have contact. Maybe I want these to have some sort of different styling from everything else. So we can do that using a new selector. So I'm going to go to the very end of my CSS code. And if I want to select every element of a certain type, I can just enter what you would do for that tag over here. So in this case, I want to do it for my H2s. So the text of projects, for about, for contact. So I can just write H2. And this will select all of my heading twos. And then now I can do space, and then my opening and closing curly brackets, and I can change some CSS code here. So for this, I'm going to show you a couple of new kind of font things, but I also do want to show you that kind of concept of specificity that I mentioned before. So if I were to do a new font family, and this time I'm just going to find one that we haven't used yet. I'm going to do um, Tahoma. So Tahoma. So H2, open, close, same property as before, font family, and setting it to Tahoma. When I save and go back to my website, you'll notice that all of my other text is now using that Open Sans font from Google Fonts, but any of my H2s here is going to use my Tahoma font that I specified. And that's going back to this concept right here. Before we applied styles to everything at once. But now that we've selected only of our H2s, which is our element selector, that's a little bit more specific than universal. So that one's going to actually be used instead of the other one. So now let's learn some more different font styling techniques here with our H2. So I'm going to go to the end of my Tahoma line and hit enter. We also have the font style property. And if I just do my colon, you'll notice that I get some options here in VS Code. Everything from calc down is a little bit more advanced than we're going to get into. But font style is how you change how italic something is. So we have options of normal, which is going to be our default, which means no italicization. Then there's italic, which is your normal italic stuff. And then oblique is like somewhere in between. It's like not fully italic, but it's not normal. I never use this. It doesn't really make sense. So I'm just going to put the keyword italic. And then when I save and go back, I can now see that my all of my H2s have that italic styling with it because we set font style to italic. The next one that I'm going to show you is going to be our font size. So font hyphen size. And you do get a bunch of options for this one. So there are keywords, large, larger, medium, small, smaller, extra large, extra small, all of this stuff. Very ambiguous. There's also all of these different units, including some of them that I showed you, some that are different that are more rarely used. So we're just going to stick with the basics and we are going to hit space and I'm going to put 20x. So this is 20 pixels is what I'm setting my font size to be. And if I do save and I go back, you'll notice that my H2's got smaller. If I get rid of this line and I save and I go back, you'll notice that they're about this big, but then I can go and specify, hey, I actually want them to be 20 pixels, and that just changes how small they are. You can also go bigger, just increase the value there, so on and so forth. So let's add another declaration block, but this time we're going to do something slightly different. So far we've only targeted everything or a specific element type. So in this case, H2. Maybe I want to apply some styling to all of my headings, right? So to my H2, and then I have some H3s down here as well. You could do just this, right? Is create separate ones and then just copy and paste and do all this. Not really the best way to do it. So if you want to apply the same styles to multiple different types of elements, you can do kind of something similar to what we did with our fallback fonts, where you just add them to the selector. So if I want to add stuff to my H1, I can type H1. But if I also want to add stuff to my H2, I can do comma space H2. And let's say I also want to do it for my H3, comma space H3. And you can add as many elements. If you wanted to do your paragraph, if you wanted to do your images, if you wanted to do your video, you can just keep going and going and going. But basically, what this selector says is look for all of my H1, H2, and H3 elements. And then we can do our space at the end and then our curly brackets to add those specific style rules. And here we're going to look at our two last kind of like font specific stuff. So one of those is going to be font hyphen weight. And then I'm going to do a colon. And you'll see that I get some options here. And our font weight is basically how bold do you want your text to be. So bold is going to be your typical, if you were in like Word or Google Docs and you highlighted something and hit bold. Bolder makes it even darker. There's also lighter, and normal. But then there's also these values 100, 200, all the way to 900. So typically lighter is, I believe, either 200 or 300. Normal is 400. Bold is 700 and bolder is 900. But if you wanted to get a little bit more granular, you could specify 500, you could specify 800 or something like that. But I'm just going to do bold. And then I'll do my semicolon. And if I save that and I go back, they're all bolded now. And I believe that that actually was the default kind of Chrome styling. So I'm just going to actually do bolder just so that we can see the difference. And when I do bolder, I go back and it's even kind of stronger right here. Last font thing I'm going to add in this same block is going to be font hyphen variant. And there's really only two options here that we care about. Normal, which is just going to be, it is how you typed. And then there's this small caps. So small hyphen caps and then semicolon. And basically what this does is it creates your text in this format where all of the letters are going to be capitalized, but the first letter of every word is going to be like just bigger. If that's a certain style that you want to do that pretty easy with font variant, small caps. So we got some more text stuff. For some reason, I don't quite know the difference. Some of these are font hyphen something, and some of them are text hyphen something. I don't quite know the difference, if I'm being honest. But we're going to learn a new selector. So far we've done universal, we've done our element, and then we've changed some elements together. But let's say we wanted to apply some specific styling to this paragraph only, right? So this is our about paragraph. Maybe we wanted to call it out with some kind of custom styling. We don't want to use that paragraph element selector like so, because that's going to change all of our paragraph text. So what we want to do is we're actually going to go to our HTML code over here on the left. And we're going to find that paragraph that we want to target. So in this case, it's under my H2 about, and it's this kind of long paragraph that starts with the digital lounge is a creative maker's place. Now, I'm going to go into the start tag. So at the end of the P and before the closing caret, and I'm going to add an attribute of ID. Now, your ID, when you hit enter, it'll give you your quotations. This is going to be some sort of unique name that you want to give this paragraph. So I'm going to just call this about paragraph, and you can call it whatever you want. I do believe that the only thing that you can't do is put numbers either in the beginning of it or anywhere in it. Definitely not in the beginning. So you can't do like ID equals 1, ID equals 2. You do have to start with some text. Make sure that you save over here on our HTML page after you've edited that. And then back here in my CSS, if I want to target this specific ID, I can use the pound symbol and then type in the name that I provided. So in this case, it's about hyphen paragraph. The pound symbol is telling the browser, look for something that has an ID equal to something. And then what we put after that pound symbol is what to actually look for. An ID can only be used once at a time. So I can't take ID equals about paragraph and put that down here somewhere. I can set a different ID though. So if I wanted this to be um, like up here for the about actual heading, I couldn't do about equals about or ID equals about paragraph. I have to make something different. So I can do about heading or something like that. So now over here we have pound about hyphen paragraph. I'm going to do space and then my open and closing curly brackets. And the first kind of text thing that we're doing that's not font is we're going to do text hyphen align. And this basically says, do you want your text to be aligned to the left, to the center, to the right, or do you want it to be justified? So I'm going to just do a colon here, and then I'm going to do center. And what this does is it allows for my text to be centered like so. There's other options if you wanted it to be aligned to the right. If you justified is that it's aligned to both left and right at the same time. That's kind of maybe when you see those like mostly like in academic articles where it's like blocks of text and then there's like the ending line has like some weird spacing in between to like make it look like a full block. That's what justify is. Um, Otherwise, you're probably just going to do your standard left, center, or right with this. After that, let's explore text hyphen decoration. What this does is it allows you to make some sort of a line that is around the text. It's not a border. We'll get to that in a bit. But this is typically how you would add like an underline. This is the most common use case of it is text hyphen decoration, and then you can set it to underline. And when you go back, my text is now underlined here. We got two options for like additional kind of style choices with that underline that we want to do. One of them is text decoration color. So by default, your underline will be black, but if you wanted to change it to be, let's say, that red color that we explored before, you can do text hyphen decoration hyphen color, colon, space, red, semicolon. Go back, and now my underline is in red. And the last styling with this is text decoration thickness. Oh, I lied. This is the second to last. There's one more. It's a really thin line. If I wanted to increase its size, you can just provide a like a pixel value. So if I wanted to do, let's say, 10 pixels, this is going to be pretty big, by the way. I'm going to do semicolon. I'll go back and I get these really thick underlines underneath. And that's text decoration thickness. And the actual last one that we're going to go through is text decoration style. So by default, you will get a solid line, but you can change it to any of these values right here. So if you want it to be a dashed line or a dotted, or if you want it to be a double underline, that is your text decoration style. So if I do, let's say, dotted and I save, we get this kind of funky underline style through here. So two last text things to show you. I'm going to get rid of my text decoration stuff right here just so that we don't have um, our text visually cluttered when we're looking at this. The first one is going to be something that Daisy asked about last week. So our indentation. So if I switch this back to left, this will be a better view. I want, let's say, this to be indented in by a little bit. So what you can do is you just use text hyphen indent, and then you provide just a value of how much you want it to be indented by. So let's just do like, let's say 50 pixels. So 50. And then when I go to my website, I see that it's been indented by my 50 pixels right here. Something that can get a little fun is you can provide negative values here. So if I do a negative 50 pixel, it's going to go the other way. So it doesn't look great because we don't have the space over here. But if for some reason you wanted like the first line to like extend a little bit to the left more than all the other lines, you can do a negative value here. Otherwise, you just do the positive one to create that indent like it's a paragraph. And then the last text one is going to be our letter hyphen spacing. And this is basically how much space do you want in between each letter. So let's say I'm going to do something pretty big, like 20 pixels, just to show you. And then now every letter gets 20 pixels in between them. We have one last kind of thing that we're going to be doing today. And I want us to change these images. So I have my project section with these kind of 6 images that show different things. But then I do have some images down here, right? My email icon, my Instagram icon, and my LinkedIn icon. Now, so far with what we've learned, it might get a little tricky to figure out how do I select these 6 watercolor images, but not these 3 icon images that I've input. Because so far we've only selected everything on the page, everything that's a certain element, so like image, or we've done an ID. And our ID can only work once. So I could do, like I kind of mentioned before, each image has ID equals, you know, first image, and then I just keep replicating and do something like this, where it would be like first image, second image. But this gets super manual after a while. So similar to our ID, where we said ID equals about paragraph, which works for one element, there is one that works for multiple elements at the same time. And for that one, we're going to use what's called a class. So I'm going to just make my um, index.html one a little bit easier to read. So at the end of my first image start tag, I'm going to do class equals project hyphen images. So at the end of the quotation mark for the alt text and before the end of our start tag, I add class equals project images. Now, as I mentioned, the class is separate from our ID. So with the ID, we can only use it for one element, and then we would have to remake a new ID identifier. The class one we can use as many times as we want. So I'm just gonna highlight class equals quotation project hyphen images, and I'm gonna copy and paste it to all of my other images that I want for this styling to apply. All right. So just like we added all of our attributes before, just in our images, we did class equals project images.
How many?
There's 6 in total. So everything that's underneath this projects heading, all of those images until you get to contact. So back in our CSS, so similar to how we did our ID selector with our pound symbol, if we want to select all of the elements that have a class assigned to them, we start off our selector with a period, and that just tells the browser look for the class equals, and then you put the name of your class. So in this case, it's going to be project images. And then I hit space and in my opening and closing curly brackets to create my stuff. And now we're going to explore this concept called the CSS box model. The best way I found is to view it in Chrome DevTools. So I'm gonna go to my website and right click and click inspect. And I am going to use my element picker and click on my image right here. So this representation that is you can find under styles if it's all the way down here or on top in computed. This is what is called the box model, and this helps determine how much space on a web page an element actually takes up. So the most inner part, which they use in blue, is going to be our height and our width. So this first one is our width, so 1200 by 827. You can also change that in CSS. So in my class, I am going to set my height, colon, and I'm going to do 600 pixels, semicolon. And then I'm going to also add width and do 900 pixels. And this is how you can change the size of an element. In this case, we're doing it for all of our images that are set to project images. So when I save and I go back, then notice that all my images are smaller. And in my CSS box model in Chrome DevTools, I can see those values right here, that it's 900 by 600. Because we did not apply that class to these contact images icons down here, these don't get changed. It only changes when we've set class equals for each of our images. The next one I want to talk about is our border, which is this one in yellow. By default, every element in HTML will have this invisible border, which is this box. But we can do some CSS code to change it, and so that we can actually see this border. So I'm going to add them to my project images, and I am going to start off with border hyphen width. And this is basically how thick your border is. So I'm going to put 5px for 5 pixels. And then now if I go to my website, I can see that there's nothing yet because we have some more stuff that we have to specify. The next thing that we have to specify is going to be the style. So border hyphen style. And this is very similar to our underline styles that we had before. So I'm going to put the keyword solid, and this is just going to give me a solid line. And the last thing that we want to do is we can specify the color. So I'm going to do border hyphen color green. But again, you can use whatever color. And now when I save, I should see my 5 pixel solid green border around my images. And in Chrome DevTools, I can see that all of these sides are set to 5. Now, setting all of these 3 values can get a little tedious at times. So what you can do is start using the border shorthand. So this is instead of setting your width, your style, and your color separately, you can set them all together by just using border, and then you provide those same 3 values just in a row. So the first one is going to be your width, and then you can do a space, and then you can do the style, which in this case is solid, and then you can do a space, and then you can add the color. So in this case, it's green. And that basically does the same thing that those previous three lines of code did, but now just in one line. And I can save, and I can see that nothing actually changed over here. It's just a quicker way of writing your borders. Now there are two last things in our box model that we need to go through. The first one is going to be our padding, which is this in green. So padding is going to be any space that you want to add between your image and its border. So right now, because there's 0 on all of them, the border just like hugs the image all the way around. But you can set padding, and you can set a specific side. So you could do padding hyphen left to add more space on the left side, padding hyphen top for the top, right for the right, bottom for the bottom. Or if you just leave it at padding and you do colon, this will set all four at the same time. So if I were to do, let's say, 15 pixels, like so, and I save, I now get a little bit of breathing room and space in between my image and my border. This will also change if you don't have a border around. If you still just have like that invisible border, it'll still add space. It just might be a little bit harder to kind of visualize what it's doing. And our last one here is our margin. So this is on the very edge. And so this is the distance between this element's border and the next element's border somewhere. So similar to padding, you can do the margin top, bottom, left, or right, or you can just do margin to set them all at once. And if I do, let's say 25 pixels this time, and I save, I now get more space on all sides between the border and the other elements. What's important to note with these is that all of these combined add up to how big the element actually takes up. So if I hover over my image now with my element picker, you'll see that it's still highlighted all the way through its margins. And so sometimes as you're kind of like trying to place elements and size them where you want them to be, and you're like, it's not exactly where I'm thinking it's gonna go. It could be because one has a margin that's a little extra. You might have to look at the neighbors to see how big each of those take up, and so on and so forth. All of these get add up to determine how big the actual element is. All right. Well, I think we'll end it there, and I will see you all next week, and we'll just keep plugging away at CSS and learning some more cool things.